Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you are all good. This is a slightly longer video, so if you need to pause, go grab a drink, some snacks, come back, do that. We are using this absolutely cutesy, adorable reindeer mold from Molds and Shapes. It is the cutest mold ever for Christmas. Everything you need to know about what I've used in this video will be linked below in my description box. Just click on more and you will see my description box come up with all of the details. We are also doing something a little bit different. I'm using this CCCmold. This is a beautiful mold that I bought from Amazon. Again, all linked below. This is the CCC bauble mold. Now, it is a mold designed for fondant and cake making, but we are going to use it in this video as well. Now, there's a couple of things I'm going to do with this mold. First up, my initial feeling was I want to make some silicone inlays from these to use with the reindeer mold. However, what I'm going to do first is just make some castings. Now, the reason I'm doing this is I'm not 100% certain if I want to use some castings or some inlays in the reindeer mold. B, if I destroy the mold with silicone, which I was hoping would not happen because I've used CCC molds before with silicone and they're fine, then at least I've got the masters from the original mold and I can remold them if I need to. So first up, we're just going to go with something super fast, and that is the polyurethane resin. Now this polyurethane is from Let's Resin and it cures white. It's a real simple, easy and fast mix for 30 seconds, pour, and you can demold after just 10 minutes. So that is why I use polyurethane for the quickest projects. It's just so fast. Now, if you cannot get hold of the Let's Resin polyurethane, there are other polyurethanes available here in the UK from MB Fiberglass, or where I get mine is from I Love Mixed Media, and the discount code for I Love Mixed Media is also down below. I get some gorgeous ones from Denise. She does the black and the white, so super helpful. This is how fast it cures. Now this is almost in real time. I've slightly sped it up because it can take up to 10 to 15 minutes to turn completely white. But once it starts, it is such a cool effect. It's like a snow blizzard taking over. So I'm just leaving it in so you can see how fast it happens. This is 10 to 15 minutes later and it is time to demold the polyurethane castings. Now you can see on the CCC mold it has got like the string holding up the baubles, but it is so detailed and so fiddly and fine. I'm not going to worry about using that side of the mold because honestly, like I said, this mold is designed for fondant and for cake decorating. And for me to actually fill each and every one of those cavities, it just wasn't working out. It became so kind of fragile at the point where they were all joined. They all just fell off. So I'm not going to worry about those sections. Really just focus on the baubles themselves. Next up, we're going to make some silicone inlays using the exact same mold. And I am a silicone rubber ambassador for Let's Resin, so the details will be in the description box below if you fancy getting your hands on some of this silicone rubber. Now, because this is the first time I'm going to be using the CCC mold for the silicone, I am going to give it a very light spray of the silicone release spray just in case. I don't always use the silicone release spray, but it's just a peace of mind because this is the first time using it in this mold. I'm colouring my silicone with some blue mica powder just because it makes them so much easier to see, especially when you're using them in clear resin. It makes them stand out, and this blue is stunning. Now, when you are pouring silicone, this is measurable by weight 1:1. Mix it for 5 minutes and pour it from high up. You don't want to pour your silicone directly over your mold. This silicone is pretty bubble free, but to help those bubbles release, pouring it from high up helps the silicone knock itself out. So it knocks its own bubbles out because you're pouring from 2 to 3 feet off the surface. And that is why I make quite a mess here, because when you're pouring from quite high up, the control element kind of fades. You have a lot less control. And of course, as always, I had leftovers. So I'm using this other CLAIRESCRAFTYCORNER, which is beautiful trees. And this is what they are looking like next day. Something weird that did happen is that I didn't use the silicone rubber release spray, the silicone release spray on the trees, because that was a last minute, all quickly, let me grab this because I've got some leftover silicone. I didn't use the spray, I just poured, and I found them so much easier to release from the mold than I did with the baubles where I had used the silicone release spray. It was fiddly. I got them out in the end, but they were definitely more harder to demold. So, lesson to me, I might not use the silicone release spray in future. The trees, honestly, they just popped out. They popped out. Whereas these, yeah, a lot more fiddly. But all you have to do is just bend the mold and just carefully, slowly, carefully peel them back bit by bit. Now I did speed it up because again this video is a bit lengthy and it was a really long process for me to do that gently, making sure that I got absolutely no rips. Now it is time to start working on the reindeer, and we are going to be doing the nose and the antlers and the hands, the paws, all in super sparkly glitters. Now these glitters are by Hemway, and the reason I'm using these glitters, I'm not sponsored by Hemway at all, I just love their glitters. The reason I'm using these is because they are the perfect colours for what I need. I literally looked through my entire glitter stash and these colours are everything. And guys, if you know me, if you've been with me maybe more than 1 or 2 Christmases, you'll know that the Hemway red is my absolute favourite red glitter on this planet. So again, hemway.com if you want to get your hands on any Hemway glitters. So we are going with red in the nose. I'm not going to mention his name with the red nose because I believe that is copyrighted, so we're not copying him. I just like red noses on reindeers. We're going with this gorgeous Hemway red glitter in the nose. And then I've got these beautiful browns and rose gold glitters. They are stunning, and I just thought if we make Mr. Reindeer pop with these beautiful glitter colours, then the rest of the mould can be quite neutral and quite muted, so that the reindeer is the main feature, you know, he's the main character and he's gonna pop with these glitters. This brown is everything. There is something about the brown glitter from Hemway that is giving me like New Year's Eve fancy sparkly dress vibes. But first, a little bit of red in that nose. I mixed up the tiniest amount of resin in a cup with the red glitter. Now, when I use glitter, I know not everyone feels this way, but when I use glitter in my resin, I like to pack out my resin. I want my resin fully and utterly saturated with glitter. I think this gives the best effect for me personally. Now, how you decide to use your glitter is entirely up to you. But yeah, I like mine packed in. So like almost more glitter than resin. The brown from Hemway is purely for the antlers, and I wasn't sure at this point if I was going to use the brown all over, but it was only really here that I decided to mix it up and give the head and the, I keep saying hands, the head and the paws, the hooves. Hooves. Is it hooves? Do reindeer have hooves? Yes. Not paws, Claire. It's not a bear. Are you okay, Claire? Guys, I need to study animals a bit more. Okay, we're going with this absolutely stunning, like a rose gold for the main say main body. The main body of the reindeer is going to be in this rose gold, and I think it offsets with the brown and the red so beautifully. Totally the perfect colours, what I was looking for, and I'm so happy that they just happen to be in my stash. I am filling this mould very tentatively. I'm trying to be neat, but it just doesn't come naturally to me, guys. There's always spillage and there's always a drip where it's just dolloped off of my lollipop stick at the last minute. But don't worry about the clear up. We can do that as we go, and then when the resin cures we can clean it up even more, but I'll talk more about that in a second. I'm just loving this little guy so much. I did unfortunately put a little bit too much in here, so I just wiped it around with the cotton bud. I didn't want the red leaking into the rose gold, and vice versa. Didn't want that rose gold getting into his nose. I want his nose to be purely red. And you can see, even when even when I try to clean up, it's like it gets worse before it gets better, you know. This is the next day and it is fully cured. I'm just using some tape to clear up those edges where I kind of made some splashes and spilled a little bit of glitter into the mold. I really want that out of there. I don't want to keep it in. Now, the one thing I forgot to film was with the leftover little bit of resin that I had, I added some black pigment and I just popped 2 tiny dollops of that black resin into the eyes to give him those poppy eyes. And yes, now I'm just using white acrylic paint on the back of that to give the eye socket. My silicone inlays have now been sitting out for 24 hours. I only recently learned from Wendy at Toonfish Crafts, you shouldn't use your silicone moulds and your silicone inlays straight away. Like, who knew? I've been doing that this whole time. So they have been sitting out for 24 hours and I'm confident that they are ready to put into the mould. Now, this resin here, why didn't I show it on screen? Claire, what is wrong with you? This is the 4-hour cure resin from Let's Resin. Now, I've had my bottles of resin sitting in a hot bath. Now, I always said to people, only put part A in a hot bath. You don't want to heat up both parts because then it's just potentially going to overheat and go exothermic. But I did it this time. I broke my own rules. I put both parts A and B in a little bucket of hot water for 10 minutes just to minimize those air bubbles. Because this is a 4-hour cure resin, I'm more likely to get those air bubbles in there. So yeah, anything I can do to reduce the risk of the air bubbles, I'ma do it. And I knew that I wasn't going to be working too long on this. I knew that this was a simple pour it in, blow out the air bubbles with a heat gun, lay in my inlays and walk away kind of job. I was confident it wasn't going to go exothermic and I had enough time to play with it, even though the resin was quite hot at this point. Okay, inlays. At the beginning of the video, I wasn't sure if I was going to use the actual white polyurethane pieces or if I was going to use the inlays. But either way, I had the choice. I had choices here. So I did decide inlays were the way forward, and that is what you can see me doing here. Now, I have kind of sped this up because I wasn't sure where I wanted the inlays. I was just placing them down almost like my Mr. Reindeer or my Mrs. Reindeer has got a string of dangly baubles above their head. I just wasn't sure what order I wanted them to go in. But after playing around with them for a while, I really did see a design come to mind. And that was just to use a simple design of 5 inlays in a really natural curve that you would see on a chain if you were to hang a chain. So yes, just 5 inlays, 1 in the middle, 2 either side. I did swap out the one on the left. It just felt a little bit too small to fit in with all of the others. So I removed that and I put one in that was slightly bigger, more matching with the others. And I just left them to sit there. The hardest part for me, I'm not going to lie, guys, it was deciding what to do once these inlays were taken out. I had so many ideas running through my head, and if I was brave enough and I had the courage, I'm so intimidated by lights. I loved the idea of, once peeling these out, maybe painting them with alcohol inks, so just a really nice light coat of an alcohol ink colour, say red, blue, yellow, all of those bright Christmas lights, even though these are baubles, but we're going to make them lights, and put some lights inside. I've never used lights in resin. I'm always intimidated by them. I'm also scared about the longevity. Like, what if the lights break a week later? Then you're stuck with these lights inside. So my initial wanting was to paint each individual inlay here with an alcohol ink, and then UV kind of resin glue lights inside each individual one, and create this gorgeous light up. I was just too scared to do it, guys. I was too intimidated by it. So if you have done something like that, let me know. My other ideas were to put UV resin with acetate over the top and maybe make them into shakers. That would have been really, really cool. Or even to use glow-in-the-dark powders or glow-in-the-dark glitters to make them glow as well. I got scared of all of it. I just couldn't bring myself to risk it. I felt like each and every one of those was a risky way to go forward. I was worried that the acetate wouldn't quite stick and then some of the resin would leak down into them. And yeah, definitely something I want to try though. I'm going to be brave and I'm going to try that in a future video. I might even try to make an actual light, like a string of real lights in there. We shall see, we shall see. Now, what I really wanted to do here as well, another thing I didn't do, but an idea for you guys, was to do white acrylic paint blobs. So to make it look like it's snowing down. But I opted not to do that. I felt like at this point I was trying to chuck everything at this one mold. And there's definitely projects where I love to throw everything in, but this wasn't one of them. I wanted to keep it quite simple. What I did end up using were the Let's Resin Intense Chameleon powders. Now, I've never used these before. You'll know how much I love the chameleon powders per se. I use them a lot, but I've never used the Intense. I've had these sitting here for a few weeks, and I thought maybe now's the time to crack out the Intense chameleon powders and see what they look like. You would have already seen me use the gold Deco Color metallic pen and a micro brush to get the caps. So there's caps on each and every one of these baubles, but my pens are too fat. I've got really fat chunky nibs. My pens were too clumsy and too fat to get into the fine detail. So I just used a micro brush with some of that gold pen, as you saw, on a piece of silicone, just to paint the inside of the caps. Sorry about the wobble here. I kept knocking the camera, but I'm using the gold and the silver pen to highlight my inlaid areas, the details on the inlaid areas, to highlight those before I go in with the Intense chameleon powders, because I didn't want to just go in with the powders and lose all of the details that these inlays had. Granted, I'm not doing a very neat job here, but I just felt like they needed a little something to bring them out before I put the chameleon powders down. Now, this is about half an hour later. All of those pens have dried out and it's time to put my chameleon powders down. Now, they were not lying. When they said intense, these are intense. You can already see the difference between this powder and any of the chameleon powders by Let's Resin that I've used before. Not only are they way more intense and rich in color, but they're a denser powder. They're a thicker, denser powder compared to the normal chameleon Let's Resin powders. So I'm really happy to see that they are totally different to the chameleon powders. The color, the rich colors are so beautiful and just different. I guess I didn't know what to expect. I guess I was just thinking maybe they're gonna just be the same, but maybe a different color, but they're not the same at all. This green is everything. It's about as Christmas green as you could possibly get. Luckily, there was only 5 in the pack. I say only, that's a great number. There were 5 in the pack and I had 5 inlaid areas to colour. So luckily we get to see what each and every one of these look like. Of course I made a mess. This powder gets everywhere. I should use Wendy from Toonpish Crafts' idea of mixing the powders in with alcohol and painting them on, but I didn't think at the time. So I made a mess and I cleaned it all up with the isopropyl alcohol because I don't want that powder to be anywhere else. At this point, I'm thinking these colours are more like a vintage Christmas colour, like a dark and moody vintage Christmas, more than your bright typicals, reds and, you know, those kind of colours. Now, so many of you told me that the intense chameleon powders can be used with a white background. You don't need black, which was great, and I was trusting you guys on this. I decided to use the polyurethane resin to cover these in. Now, I do want a white background on my whole entire piece, but I was nervous that if I just poured white right now, that it would just push out some of those powders and those powders would leak into my background, and I didn't want that to happen. So that is why I am filling the baubles first before doing the white background. The other thing I did do, now bear in mind guys, this is already 3 days. We're already 3 days into this project. This is day 3. I've already done the reindeer, waited 24 hours. I've made the inlays. I've made the, you know, castings of the baubles. And of course I've put the inlays in. So we're on day 3. I was toying with the idea of doing yet another clear resin layer and laying real chain down in. So I've got some junk jewellery, faux gold, faux silver. I was toying with the idea of doing another clear layer, laying in some real chain. I thought that would have looked really good, but purely for time constraints, we're already on day 3. I didn't have it in me to wait another 24 hours for the next layer. Something to do in the future. Instead, I went with my fine artistic details of using my metallic gold and silver pens to create the chains myself. Again, not fine art here. Now, the polyurethane that I've poured into those baubles has started to go off. It started to set, and I was confident that I could now pour the background layer, which again, I'm using the polyurethane in white. Of course, if you want a white background, you could use your epoxy resin. At this point, you couldn't use Ecos because it just would not stick to the resin and they would snap apart. Are you ready? Are you ready? I absolutely love the results on this, guys. We have got vintage Christmas meets super glittery reindeer with a red nose. I absolutely adore this. And you can see how well that acrylic paint worked as well behind the eyes. That is another thing you can use in your resin, guys. Once it's dried, you can use it. It's perfect. It comes out of the mold perfectly. I love everything about this. I love the glitters, the way the reindeer pops. I'm so glad I cleaned up after myself when I used the powders as well, because that white background is really, really beautiful and it makes everything else look so pristine and neat. Now the inlays, they're definitely different. I think my hand-drawn highlights could have been a bit neater. But hey, it's handmade with love, not perfection. They look like handmade baubles put into the background as well. And the surface has got this very strange dotted appearance. I don't know why that is. I'm guessing it's because I've poured polyurethane and not resin. It could be uncured areas in the polyurethane maybe. But how bizarre that it works like a snow. It looks deliberate. It looks like I've deliberately put dots on the surface. So I was a bit kerfuffled. I was a bit discombobulated about that. I was like, oopsie daisy, what is that there for? But it works. It looks like I went down the snow route to create this snowy background. So again, I don't know why those dots are there. It could be the mixture of the isopropyl alcohol combining with the polyurethane. Maybe they don't like each other, but hey, nonetheless, we've got this gorgeous spotted background that we're going to call snow, and the baubles, I just think they've come out so beautifully. Could you create those baubles yourself? You don't have to do the inlays. Yes, absolutely. You could use the pen in the mold and use your chameleon powders and your resin in the mold to create those baubles yourself. You don't need to have created the inlays. Do you know what I mean? So you don't have to have made the inlays to make this design, But yeah, I really wasn't sure what direction this was going in. So I decided to go down the inlay route just in case I had some kind of whirlwind idea to use lights or use glow in the dark stuff. So that's why I use the inlays. You don't have to. You can just create your baubles, place your baubles down in. But I love it. I absolutely love it. I'm so happy I decided to go with something different in the background other than just a plain white, which, by the way, I think would have looked sublime. It would have looked beautiful had I not done anything in the background. I just really wanted to have a play around with Reindeer and have a play around with this mold. I hope you feel inspired by this video. I hope you've learned some techniques you can take away with you as well to create your own. If you do anything like this, don't forget to tag me. Hashtag Claire made me do it. Everything you need in the video will be in the description box below. Again, check out my community tab as well, because there are some fantastic Black Friday deals going on right now with various companies that I work with. And yeah, I will see you on Monday for the next video. Bye. Oh, also, if you're still here, I do have a home channel you may not know about. I do have a home channel now. So head on over to my home channel. It is linked here and it's linked below. Check out my community tab as well. If you are interested in everything home, DIYs, shop with me's, because tomorrow's video is my Christmas shop with me with all of the Christmas music and I can barely contain myself. And breathe. See you then. Bye.